another round of applause to City Councilwoman And as was mentioned, my name is Jesse Nevel, and on the platform of Unity Through Reparations, I am running for mayor of St. Petersburg, Florida. And I, first of all, want to also appreciate this meeting and the Uhuru movement, Gazi Kozo, and Hakima for the statements that have been made about gentrification. And in Akile's presentation, she used the term war zone. And I think it's really important to understand that while usually gentrification is spoken of in terms of real estate and property value and taxes and rent, gentrification is war. Yeah. That's what gentrification is. And the victims of gentrification are not just those who are forced out of their homes or evicted or forced out of their neighborhoods. The victims of gentrification are also Dominique Battle, Ashanti Butler, Renata Miller, Devon Johnson, Martin Pellet, Nevel Walker, Tyrell Lewis, Tyson Lacey. Because gentrification and the public policy of police containment and police terror against the black community are one and the same. Yes. They're part of the same precedent in public policy. So, if you look at the statements put out by Rick Kreisman and his deputy mayor about the trends in development happening in St. Petersburg right now, including the recent purchase of an entire lot on 4th Street by a New York billionaire named John Catsimatidis, they refer to this as St. Pete in progress, and they even use the word gentrification as a positive element of growth in the city, quote unquote. And their defenders will say, well, gentrification is a complicated issue, it gets a bad reputation. But if you look in the Merriam-Webster's dictionary, hardly a leftist screed, the definition of gentrification includes displacement of poor residents. That's in the white dictionary. Yes. So they are consciously promoting the displacement of the black community. Yeah. It is not an accident, it is according to their plan. Yeah. And it's nothing new. It's the history of this city. It's the history of development for the white business interests and ruling class and the general white population at the expense of the black community. When you look at the history of St. Petersburg and the black community on the south side of St. Petersburg, in the 1800s and early 1900s, African people were forced to live in the South Side under Jim Crow and segregation. And despite facing horrific conditions at the hands of the social system, including, obviously, police violence, but also lynchings by ordinary white people, like in 1914, when 1,500 white men, women, and children lynched a black man named John Evans right near where the Tropicana field is, right at that corner, from a light post. And people who were in that white mob included the guy who founded the Tampa Bay Times, the guy who Straw Park is named after, were in that mob. Despite those conditions, the black community in the south side of St. Pete struggled to build a community and struggled to build some semblance of economic life. And there were actually over 100 black-owned businesses. Then you had so-called desegregation. And the way that the city historians like to tell the story is they say, well, ironically, the Civil Rights Act led to the demise of black businesses in South St. Pete. So what they're doing is they're actually blaming that. They're blaming the demise of black economic development on African people and their struggle for civil rights. But it was not civil rights that led to the demise of black businesses in South St. Pete. It was gentrification. Because shortly after that happened, you start to see these white businesses taking over the South Side. And all of the black-owned movie theaters and banks and restaurants closing down. Then they run an interstate right through 22nd Street, which was the heart of black economic life in this city. And then in the 80s, they lied to the black community that resided in the community known as the gas plant where over 800 black families lived and where there were many businesses and other economic development there, they lied to them and said, well, we need to move you out of the way so we can build some light industry to provide jobs and economic development. And then they built the Tropicana Field Dome, the baseball stadium, before the city of St. Pete even had a baseball team to put there. So that brings us into the 90s. Now, if you want to see what gentrification in this city looks like, there's an area called the Bartlett Park area section of South St. Petersburg that there have actually been national studies of gentrification that talk about San Francisco, Atlanta, Los Angeles, Oakland. But number one on their list of examples of a model of what gentrification looks like is St. Petersburg, Florida. The Urban Institute study. And they talk about Bartlett Park. Now, Bartlett Park was actually was inhabited by white people, and then there were some black families who moved there, and then there was white flight. This is in the 60s and 70s. Then, in the 80s, you had the U.S. government-orchestrated crack cocaine explosion that dropped like a bomb on the poor and oppressed black working-class community of this entire country. And, of course, they try to slander the black community and expect us to believe that poor and oppressed people living in South St. Pete had access to jumbo jets and boats to bring in cocaine from Honduras and Nicaragua and El Salvador. Sorry, I'm pretty sure that was Oliver North and Ronald Reagan. So that leads to immense devastation of Bartlett Park. Immense devastation. And they quote this guy, I have this article here, so offensive, it's hard to stomach. It's called Here Comes the Neighborhood. And they quote this guy named Tom Tito. I'll say the name, Tom Tito. Remember that name. He was one of the first gentrifiers of Bartlett Park. And they quote him saying, out of nowhere, crack cocaine exploded in South St. Pete. Yeah, out of nowhere. So anyway, so then, as this devastation and this illegal drug economy is imposed on the black community of South St. Pete, then the gentrifier starts to move in. And then, with the gentrification comes the intensification of the public policy of police containment. 1996, they killed Tyrone Lewis. And the community fights back. And that's what pushed back gentrification. And then, as this article points out, it says, they call it the riots. The riots set us back 10 years, because again, it was the struggle of the black working class that pushed back the forces of gentrification, at least for a moment. And then it says, enter Mayor Rick Baker, who along with Deputy Mayor Goliath Davis made the revitalization code word for gentrification, which is a code word for colonialism, of Midtown a top priority since his election in 2001. Over the last 6 years, over $100 million in federal grants have poured into the area. Really? To who? As prosperity slowly made its way into Midtown, adventurous investors have moved to enclaves like Bartlett Park, attracted to historic housing stock, quick access to I-275, and the proximity to downtown Tampa Bay. Dan Tom, a tall, blonde, 35-year-old investor from Chicago, was one of those early urban pioneers. 3 years ago, Tom moved his real estate investment company to St. Pete. Attracted by Baker's Midtown initiative, Tom and his business partners set their sights on the city's south side, specifically Bartlett Park. His first investment was a Parkview Motel on 22nd Ave South across from the football fields, a 20-unit complex that he described as being full of nothing but druggies and whores. This is how these real estate developers view the black community. It took him only 14 months to clean up the property and sell at a profit, he boasts. We want to make money, he says. We took that property, stabilized it, and started making our investment. Later on, I asked him, well, what about the fact that when you do that, it raises the rent for people who live in that community? He says, I'm a businessman. I make my living off of raising it. Come on. This is war. This is war that we're talking about. So that's the legacy of Rick Baker, and that's the legacy that led to the murders of Javon Dawson and Markel McCullough and Jarrell Walker during his time as mayor. In fact, you know that notorious video of the St. Pete police slashing the tents, those homeless people were living in an abandoned building that was then bought up by an investor during Baker's time as mayor, and then they forced those homeless people to go live in a park, and then he sends in the St. Pete police to slash their tents. So this is the legacy of Rick Baker. And then Kreisman ran for mayor on the promise that he would be like Baker. And he kept that promise. And now you have this so-called CRA. What a glob of spit in the face of this community.
Come on, Jesse!
What an offense. They call that economic development. $67 million over the course of 30 years. Meanwhile, they just dropped $85 million on a police station across the street from the current one. This year, they brag about $500,000 towards economic development. By the way, half of that went towards black-owned businesses. 2/3 of that half went towards one business.
Come on, Jesse.
And you know where some of that money went? The Democratic Party.
Yeah.
Did you know that?
No.
The Democratic Party actually returned it because it looked so bad that this money that was being generated supposedly to benefit the black community all of a sudden was going towards the Pinellas County Democratic Party, Kreisman's organization. And that was in the news, and they were like, that looks really bad, so they gave it back. This is a profit-making scheme.
Yes,
For the ruling class. And, you know, this is, again, I think it is, we've been talking about this all along. We've been talking about gentrification, but now we get to the heart of everything else that we've been talking about, because at the core of every contradiction that we've talked about, whether it's the sewage, whether it's the police violence, whether it's the big development happening in downtown, the high-rises, the condos, the tripling of the rent for small businesses, all of this revolves around this problem, which is the gentrification and colonial destruction of the black community.
Yes.
And the reason why this is important is because it does require us white people to examine our role and our complicity in all of this.
Yes.
Very, very important. Part of why the Good White People documentary is so chilling is because it is a mirror for white people. When you watch that, it looks very, very familiar. And part of why even they're like, oh, well, you're white, you're 27. You know, what's this about? Is because I'm what a gentrifier looks like.
Come on.
And instead of going along with and cooperating with gentrification, the white people in the Unity Through Reparations movement finally have the opportunity to say that we will not cooperate with their predatory. I'm the white 27-year-old face of defiance to gentrification. By calling me the Uhuru candidate.
Come on, Jesse.
Guess what? The only thing that has stood between this community and total annihilation at the hands of these parasites is the Uhuru movement. So yeah, I'm the Uhuru candidate. I will wear that title as a badge of honor. Because while they've been busy gentrifying and destroying and policing and murdering and harassing and threatening, the Uhuru movement, without any funding from the government, built a community center where weddings and parties and political enterprise, and built a radio station controlled by the Black community, and built a community commercial kitchen that small businesses and vendors get to use as an incubator to build genuine economic development. Build a marketplace. I am proud of my relationship with this community. And while they've been carrying out all these crimes, I've been busy, and the Uhuru Solidarity Movement has been busy raising reparations to support what the Uhuru movement is doing. To support genuine economic development of the black community. That's what I intend to do when I win. Is that, you know, these two Ricks, and by the way, those signs, make my blood boil.
Yeah.
And not because my opponent is putting his signs up, but because that's like a death sentence that they're trying to impose. For Rick Baker's name to be popping up all over the South Side, that's a threat.
Yeah.
Because this is war.
Yes.
And the last thing I want to say is that during this, this election, the two Ricks, they're so similar to each other that, you know, they can't even attack each other on local policies.
Yeah.
So now Kreisman is attacking Baker because Baker supported Sarah Palin, whatever. It's stupid. Because they're so similar in terms of what they represent locally.
Yeah.
Kreisman can't attack Baker's record because he ran claiming he was going to continue Baker's record. So that would look ridiculous. So instead, they just wash their hands of anything that you try to pin on them. If you bring up Tropicana Field, they'll say, well, that happened before either of us were mayor, we can't do anything about that. We have to honor the past and embrace the future. Or if you talk about Dominique, Ashanti, and Lanaya, Kreisman's people will say, well, that's the sheriff's department, so that's not under the mayor's jurisdiction. Well, let me tell you something. When I'm mayor, I will take responsibility for all of what came before me. I will take responsibility for all of the Africans murdered by Baker, and all of the Africans murdered by Foster, and all of the Africans murdered by Kreisman. I will take responsibility for that. And anything that happens in this city, I will take responsibility for. I don't care if it's the Pinellas County Sheriff's Department, not in St. Petersburg.
Come on,
So, despite what some have said, I think many white people know I've been talking about white people all along. I've been talking about us all along. Unity through reparations is a call to white people.
Yes.
It's a call to white people to get on the right side of history. Because if we don't want to see sewage in our water, if we don't want to see small business owners have to pay triple the rent, if we don't want to see all these other problems, then the solution is to unite with the black community. That's what this campaign represents. That's what Aquile represents, and that's what this people's movement represents. So, August 29th, vote Aquile for District 6, vote Jesse Nevel for Mayor of St. Petersburg, and let's build a truly progressive city in the city of St. Petersburg. Unity through